Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. This is the first personal story I've ever told. I always tell folk in fairy tales, so go easy on me. My brother and I grew up in the 1960s and 70s as lucky, suburban nomads. We lived in the suburbs, so that was the suburban part. And the lucky part was that our mother and father were both teachers in public schools. So every summer, every school break, all four of us were off at the same time. But we didn't waste that time. We traveled. And that's the nomads part. But both my parents had grown up as children of the Depression, so we traveled on the cheap. We went camping. We started out with a little tent that was big enough for the four of us, and then we got a tent camper, then we got a little pull-behind Shasta camper, and then we got the big daddy of campers. We got the truck camper. The big camper sat on top of the back of the truck, and it went out over the cab of the truck, and if you were riding up there, you could look out through that picture window, and it was like a panorama of the scenery that you were going through. It was great. Now, we would go camping on the weekends. We would go camping on the long weekends. We would camp for a week here and there, all over Western New York State. The Adirondacks, the Catskills, if there was a state park there, we were camping at it. Well, one year when I was 11, we took an 8-week-long camping trip across the US to the Pacific and then back through southern Canada. And you can bet that we hit every national park and provincial park along the way and back. We spent 3 weeks camping in New England. We went to all the historic sites, all the attractions. Most Christmases, we would go to Florida and camp near our grandparents who lived down there. And every Easter, we would go to Myrtle Beach and camp. It was our thing. It was our family thing. We were the camping family, the traveling family. And one of the best parts about it was camping food. Oh, there's nothing like a hot dog on a stick cooked over a campfire, or roasting those marshmallows to make s'mores. Or my mom always made a big batch of sloppy joe, and she would heat it up on the camp stove on top of the picnic table in our campsite. But the real treat for us was breakfast. We would get these little teeny boxes of cereal. Maybe some of you remember them. You could open up the flaps, and it was covered inside in wax paper with some cereal. You just poured the milk right in there and ate out of the box. And it wasn't like the cereal we had at home. We had serious cereal at our house. We had Wheaties, shredded wheat, Cheerios, but when we got those teeny little boxes of cereal, we could have Sugar Smacks or Cocoa Krispies or Cap'n Crunch or Frosted Flakes. We thought we were living large. You can believe it. Well, that's what we did. That's what we did as a family for about 15 years, and then in the fall of 1978, I started my senior year in high school. The next spring, I would be graduating, and the year after that, my brother would be graduating, and we would be going on to college and so on. And in the fall, my parents announced to us that we were going to take a big trip for Christmas. We were going to go to California for a week, and not on the cheap either. We were going to fly there and back. We were going to rent a car. We were going to stay in hotels every single night. And we were going to eat at restaurants 3 meals a day. Well, maybe with a few of those tiny boxes of cereal. So we spent the whole fall planning this trip because planning's half the fun of the whole trip. We all chose attractions and sites and that we wanted to see and things that we wanted to do. And so all of us got to do a couple of things on our wish list that we made up. So the day came and we took off. It was Christmas Eve day. And we took that flight to San Francisco and we landed and we went to pick up our rental car. Now, my dad was not a car guy, but my brother was a motorhead, and he still is. So they let him pick out the rental car. And when we got there it was, surrounded by an aura. It was a canary yellow, 2-door, 8-cylinder Camaro. That was my brother's dream car. But when you're trying to get 2 adults and 2 teenagers and all your suitcases into a Camaro, it was not very practical at all. The trunk is like the size of a suitcase itself. So we put one back there, and then in the back seat, there was a big suitcase between my brother and I, and in the passenger seat, my mom had a suitcase under her legs, and my dad was a tall guy. And when he got in the driver's seat, he pulled that seat back as far as it would go, but his knees were still scrunched up, and the steering wheel was like this. And we had 600 miles to drive. It was too late to trade it in, so off on our adventure we went. We drove into San Francisco, and we went to our swanky hotel. And the next day on Christmas Day, we went to an even swankier hotel for Christmas brunch. We walked in, and we were awestruck. A golden escalator, chandeliers hanging from the ceilings, a glass elevator. We didn't know what to do. We walked into the dining room and looked out over the Christmas buffet. There were all kinds of breakfast foods. Some foods we couldn't quite identify. Some things we had never seen before, but we were ready to try it all. And that's where my lifelong love affair began, with bagels and lox. I had heard of such a thing, but never seen such an exotic food. So I took that bagel and slathered it with cream cheese, put on those oily, pungent lox, and took that first bite and fell in love. Well, we did all the attractions in San Francisco that tourists did. We took the car down Lombard Street, which is like the curviest street in America. We took the cable cars over the hills and down throughout the city. We went to Fisherman's Wharf, and of course we went across the Golden Gate Bridge. As we went across, it was like a dream come true. There was Alcatraz right over there. Well, we drove about half an hour north of the city, and we came to the Muir Woods National Monument, where we saw redwood trees.
Redwoods.
Yeah. Now, we had seen these in Life magazine, National Geographic magazine, but it's like Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon. Until you're standing right there in the middle, you just can't get the scale and the magnificence of it. We drove and walked throughout those ancient trees. And on the way back, we stopped at a giant sequoia grove as well. And we walked and walked until we came to one tree, and my brother said, I think we can reach all the way around this. So we all got around that tree and held our arms out as far as they would go, and we did it. We reached all the way around with our fingertips just barely touching. Well, the next day we headed down the coast on our 8-hour ride in the canary yellow 2-door 8-cylinder Camaro. So we stopped a couple of times. We stopped in Malibu. The coast was great. We took the Pacific Coast Road Route 1, and it follows the coast the whole way down. Looking out into the Pacific, it seemed like it would never end. Beautiful cliffs. We'd stop at little towns and go to their piers over the Pacific, eat some seafood, and watch the seals and sea otters playing just feet away from us. It was like nothing we'd ever seen. Well, then we started into Los Angeles. We were about 30 miles outside when we came to an attraction that we had not planned on. A traffic jam. Well, that's what LA is infamous for. There were 6 lanes on each side, and we came to a complete stop, scrunched up in our Camaro. And after about half an hour, we calculated that we were moving about 5 feet every 2 minutes. And my dad said, "I've got to go." He had a notoriously small bladder. And so the plan was we were getting off at the very next exit and finding a gas station or somewhere for him. And after another 15, 20 minutes, we'd maybe moved another 20 or 30 feet. And he flung open the door and said, "Meet me at the next exit. You drive," he said to my mother. Well, we watched him as he walked on the dotted white lines right down the freeway until he was out of sight. Well, my mom barely drove at home, much less driving in a strange city in a strange car. She started hyperventilating. I didn't have my license, but my brother said, "I'll drive." And he jumped behind that wheel of the canary yellow 2-door 8-cylinder Camaro, and he was ready to experience his dream, flying down the LA freeway at 5 miles an hour. Not quite what he had imagined. Well, we waited and waited, and about 20 more minutes went by. We'd moved maybe 100 feet when we saw him coming down the freeway on the dotted white line. My dad headed back to the car. Well, my brother jumped in the back seat, and my dad scrunched himself into that driver's seat. Needless to say, we were all relieved. Well, in Los Angeles, we went to Hollywood. The sign up on the hills. We got a map of the celebrities' homes, and we drove all around Beverly Hills. We went to Universal Studios, which had just kind of opened for tours, and we took a tram car with a guide, and there we were on Beaver Cleaver Street. And then we turned the corner, and we were coming right down the main street of Dodge City. We'd watched that on Gunsmoke for years. I thought Miss Kitty was coming out of the saloon door. And then we got on a boat, and we were coming along through a lagoon when off to our left, we saw it coming toward us. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. It was Jaws, and he was coming straight to us. We didn't know what to think until it got close up, and even by 1978 standards, it was cheesy. I could have made that out of paper mache in science class, but still. So we were hoping to go to Disneyland, but my parents said, "We've been to Disney World 2 or 3 times, so I think you might find Disneyland kind of a disappointment." But they had a plan B. We were going to another theme park. We were going to Knott's Berry Farm.
Yeah.
Now, as theme parks go, it's hard to imagine the excitement of a theme park built around jams and jellies, but we had a good time. It was okay. Plus, it was walking distance from our hotel. And gosh, what else did we do? I know the last day we went to the farmer's market in LA. There's like acres of farmer's market with veggies and fruits, some of which we couldn't identify there either, arts and crafts. We were walking and walking and looking at everything, and we turned the corner and we ran right into my brother's gym teacher. The last thing he expected to see was one of his students 2,000 miles from home, but it just goes to show you, it is a small world after all. Well, our last stop was San Diego. We drove down the coast, and the San Diego Zoo was the big attraction. It was like the premier zoo in the country, if not the world at the time. It didn't have cages or small habitats. The animals were spread out, like is typical for zoos today. They had acres and acres of space to run and play and, be like the country and the landscape where they came from. There were elephants, giraffes, gorillas. We even saw a panda there all the way from China. It was amazing. And the last day we were there, we drove about a half an hour south of San Diego to the Mexican border. Now that was some exotic stuff for us. And we got to the border and debated about whether or not to go over. We could see over the border into Tijuana, and all my parents saw were tattoo shops and bars. So we turned around and went back to San Diego. We had seen it anyway. And our last night before we left was the big New Year's Eve celebration. And we went to this restaurant that was right on the harbor in San Diego. It was called Lubox. It is now closed. It closed in 1990. And it overlooked the harbor, all the ships, all the yachts, all the boats. It was beautiful. And we walked inside, and it was like being on a movie set. There were red leather banquettes to sit around, and the tables were covered with white linen napkins, so many plates and glasses and silverware. We weren't sure what we were gonna do or knew how to do. And the waiters came by with big leather menus. The waiters were head to toe in full tuxes. And we looked at those menus and we saw things that we thought were just fictional things on the menu, like mock turtle soup, lobster Newburgh, baked Alaska. But we had to try it all. So there we were in the lap of luxury, and my brother noticed that the waiters that were around our table, every time one of us would take a drink of water, they would reach in with their silver pitcher and fill it back up again. So he grabbed his glass of water, took a little sip, and set it down. And the waiter came in with a silver pitcher and filled it back up again. Well, he did this 5 or 6 times before the waiter refused to make any more eye contact with him. Well, the next day we were flying out of San Diego, and it had been the trip of a lifetime for all 4 of us. And my brother and I were still kind of clueless. We were dazzled by everything we had seen, everything we had done. But my parents knew that this was our very last family trip. My brother and I would go on, live our own lives, have our own adventures, and each of us still do a lot of traveling and camping. We were raised right. And as we got on that flight headed back east, little did he and I know that we were flying back into the dawn of a brand new day. Thank you.
You need her thing from Paul. Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you.